Intercultural pragmatics is also a subfield of cross-cultural pragmatics, but it is closely related to second language or foreign language learners because it leads us to know about a certain stage of learning in which speakers are not fully proficient in a second language, and at the same time they are not also completely ignorant of the second language. They are somewhere at the middle stage or even some intermediary stage of learning. So in this situation, what kind of linguistic knowledge or pragmatic knowledge they carry with themselves along with the linguistic knowledge, that is the focus of interlanguage pragmatics. It looks into the pragmatic development of second language learners, which would help them in interpreting various messages and communication in the second language. It is also considered a sub-area of language acquisition because it carries and it tells us about various aspects of language learning, and it identifies the stages of learning also. Therefore, we can consider it a part of second language acquisition, and we can see some debates about it in the books of second language acquisition or in the discussions of second language acquisition. Learners and teachers of a second language or a foreign language, they need to understand intercultural pragmatics, and they need to understand its importance because of this knowledge they will be able to understand and the second language and its actual use in the real life. And only through the knowledge of pragmatics of the second language, the learners and the teachers will be able to comprehend what is said in the second language, and even what is not said, what is beyond what is said in the second language. In simple terms, the intended meanings of the speakers of the second language. We can also say that interlanguage is related to some early stage of development. When you are learning a second language and you haven't completely learned it, you are somewhere in the middle or lesser than that. This might be called an interlanguage stage. So it may be seen as some early stage of learning also. Interlanguage language can also refer to some intermediate, dynamic and transient linguistic system that, according to certain theories, continue to develop over time. As people progress in their learning, they continue to develop their interlanguage abilities, and they continue to develop their proficiency unless they become proficient speakers like a native speaker. So interlanguage is somehow the middle or intermediate stage in which obviously the pragmatic knowledge of the learner would not be as good as of the native speaker. So because of this lack of pragmatic knowledge, there is a likelihood that the learner would commit many errors or mistakes, and interlanguage pragmatics looks into those mistakes so that they can be reduced among the learners. During this stage, learners progress in their learning, and there are some regressive and progressive elements of the learning. The learning goes forward and then sometimes may come back. So interlanguage is exactly this stage where the learning is in some unstable situation. For instance, in academic situations or in academic communication skills, we see that some people in the second language may be proficient in the writing skills, but they may not be proficient in the speaking skills of that language. They may write large essays or reports in the target language as well as written form is concerned, but they would not be able to have a successful conversation with a native speaker. They might find many problems in conversational or communication situations. So they are not at this stage can be said to have developed their communication skills completely, and this might indicate some interlanguage stage. Interlanguage use is informed by certain underlying systems which overlap and are constantly being revised by learners. As students learn more things, they increase their knowledge and pragmatic awareness about the second language and its speakers. Their interlanguage improves itself. Intercultural pragmatics in this way is essentially interested in knowing how L2 learners use their developing abilities in L2 to make a successful communication in second language, and how they are able to manage it despite their limited knowledge or gaps in their knowledge, and the sociopragmatics of the target language. They might have some linguistic knowledge of the language, but there would be certain deficiencies in their sociopragmatic knowledge of the speakers of that language. So what kind of a language is being created in such an unstable situation? That is probably a concern of intercultural pragmatics. One of the key situations or stages in intercultural pragmatics is the transfer from L1 to L2. In this we see that how the knowledge, including the linguistic and pragmatic knowledge of L1, first language of the learners, help them to understand and comprehend second language in various social situations. In many cases, this might be a problematic thing because the knowledge of first language may interfere with the understanding of second language and its culture. In this situation, ILP or intercultural pragmatics would focus on L2 learners' errors or mistakes which are caused by this lack of sociopragmatic knowledge, and what are the possible causes behind them. That is an important area of investigation. Moreover, what are the possible effects of these errors on their overall language proficiency? There could be multiple reasons for difficulty in enacting pragmatic knowledge of second language by the learners of that language. But two major reasons have been identified by various researchers in the field. One of those is the lack of knowledge or insufficient knowledge of L2 and its communicative practices. You do not become aware of various communicative practices in the second language in a jiffy or in a hurry. It takes time. So at an interlanguage stage, you are likely to miss certain pragmatic points or communicative points of about a language. Therefore, this lack of knowledge or inappropriate knowledge might hinder your progress or your ability as a proficient speaker. Another thing which may cause problems here is the problem with an easy access to the use of language in real-time context. People may have certain linguistic knowledge. They may have read about the pragmatics or sociopragmatics of the second language, but they are not available to them in real-life situations because they sometimes become anxious while using that language, and because of that, their mind does not provide them the feedback they need to develop a successful communication. Therefore, the sociopragmatics knowledge and linguistic knowledge which they have studied in books might not be readily available in actual situations. There could be multiple other aspects of intercultural pragmatics which may be discussed in detail in order to know it thoroughly.